This is the Seven Figure Standard Podcast, hosted by Arash Vossoughi and Mykie Stiller, with mindset and strategies to help you break through and create personal freedom.
Hello and welcome back to the Seven Figure Standard Podcast. I'm Mykie Stiller, joined by my co-host, Arash Vossoughi, and we're so happy to be here with you this week, talking about work habits. This is such an underrated but very, very important topic. Arash, I'm so excited to talk to you about this because you have fantastic work habits. What do you want to talk about first in this vicinity direction?
Well, I think of work habits. And I always think, why does somebody have good work habits? That's the first question. It's because they have a definite purpose they're going after. I don't think I would have good work habits if I wasn't driven by something I really wanted. Like I watch people all the time start and stop. Why do they start and stop? Because they're not going after anything. Money is not a good tool to go out. It's not even a tool, but like money is not enough to go after. You have to really go after what you really want. Okay. You have to really go after what you want the most. Like for me, it's fulfillment, it's satisfaction. Like for me, I even think about when I was in the corporate world. Like when I was in the corporate world, nobody trained me, but it meant so much to me to be productive. Like it just had a meaning to me. So to create good work habits, you have to have something you're going after, and you have to have some personal responsibility and personal pride in what you do. I remember my mentor used to tell me, he goes, "You have phenomenal work habits." I said, "I didn't always, like nobody needs to motivate me. I motivate myself. Like I'm constantly putting positive information inside of me." And so we have to really take a good look. Am I putting heart into it? I don't know if it was on our podcast or on a different platform. I was talking about quitting, and people quit all the time. Why do they quit? Because when you quit, you take yourself so many years back, and people don't realize this. So quitting can never be an option. It doesn't matter how long it's going to take. It's going to take as long as you see yourself differently. So that's where I think we should start, is observe your work habits and grade it on a scale of 1 to 10. Now, I will tell you this is going to be really contradictory to some people's program. Just because you're grinding, you have the shittiest work habits. That doesn't mean you have good work habits. Success isn't based on how hard you're working. It bases on how effective you are. So the results always tell us how effective we are. And so we've got to start with understanding it only takes 5 great hours a day to create great results. And I mean focused 5 hours. I don't mean 5 hours of scrolling in between on social media. I mean doing what we've talked a lot about on the podcast, of doing your 30, 60, 45, 90-minute sprints. But when you're doing your sprint, you're only focused on the outcome in that sprint of what you're working on. Mm-hmm. So it's important to understand that.
Let's step back for a second. And I just want to give this a definition. So obviously you and I both know exactly what we mean when we say work habits. What should someone be thinking of when you say, or when they hear work habits?
Work habits are what you're doing intentionally to an outcome that you've already created in your mind. So before I start, I know the end. Mm-hmm. Before I start, I already know the end. So I work from that place. I'm not working to the end. I'm working from the end, because that's how I get the right ideas. I get the right inspiration. So work habits are being in the spirit of what you're doing in that sprint. Okay. Now, I don't think anybody can have great work habits if they're just in front of a computer 10 hours a day. That's going to lead to burnout. That's going to lead to dissatisfaction. That's going to start getting you to question yourself. Why am I doing this? Is it why you're doing this, or am I doing this the right way?
Mhm.
Every want we have, we're either going to sacrifice for our want, or what you want is going to be a sacrifice. Okay, that's what happens. We're either sacrificing for our want. What I'll never sacrifice, and I don't encourage anybody to sacrifice, is your family, ever. Like, I don't encourage anyone ever to do that. You don't need to do that. Because let's say you start creating quote unquote success monetarily, but you're miserable. That's not success. So what we have to work with, going back to the beginning, is with a purpose. Like, I can guide people and we have phenomenal results, but then there's other people who don't get results. Why? Because they don't follow what I show them to do. That's the only reason why. I was talking to somebody the other day and I said, why do you keep asking me how to create success if you're not going to do what I tell you? Like, you don't want to create success. You're not willing to do what I tell you. Think about how ridiculous that is. And I take myself back years. I wanted freedom so bad that I went all in to do whatever my mentor told me to do. Like, it's not a hard combination, but most people are so uncoachable. When you have a really great person in your corner, it doesn't have to be a coach. Like, I talk from the coaching perspective, and they push you hard. Why do they push you hard? Because they see something in you that you don't see. And then let's say you don't have that person anymore in your life. You miss it so much, because very few people have those type of people in their life, that want to show them another version of them that they've never met. So I've got a question for everybody. I want you to observe your last 5 years. Do you want to repeat those for the next 5? And if you say yes, great. Not everybody wants to be in the top 1%. There's nothing wrong with that. Now, for me, I think you're wasting away your potential. I think you're wasting away your impact. Like, for me, my obsession that created these work habits is because I love getting better. I'm not chasing an income goal. All I'm doing is wanting to get better. I chase greatness every day. I shared that before. Like, that's when my life changed. But we've got to look at eliminating the negative influences in your life. Like, that's what I did in the beginning. I always talk about it. I had to eliminate the negative influence. The biggest negative influence was me. It was who I was being, And as I started changing those, everything changed.
Arash, you sent a video to our team last night, and I love what you said. You called it a future truth. And I think whenever you say you're chasing greatness every day, that's what you're going for, is your future truth, or you're coming from your future truth. And I think that's the perfect thing to talk about in relation to work habits, because your work habits have to match that future truth.
Yeah, I mean, the future truth, I've just given it a name because I talk a lot about future self. But when you understand what you're working on becomes your future truth, good or bad. But we've got to ask ourselves, how do I want to look? How do I want to be? How do I want to operate in the world? How much income do I want to earn? What type of vacations do I take? And you start in the beginning, it's kind of crazy because it feels like you're lying to yourself. And I want you to lie to yourself because you've got to brainwash yourself into the new person. But how many people actually write out their future truth? This is who I'm going to be. This is my new standards. Whatever I touch turns to gold. I'm going to become the best in my industry. I'm going to keep transforming myself. You have to define it. I'm going to get in the best shape of my life. I'm going to have the most amazing relationships. Once you start working on who you want to become, and then you say no to everything that's not that, over time, you're going to walk into that person. But a lot of people are just walking into the same old person every day. So it affects their results. It affects their work. And they don't put heart into their work because they're driven by the old and they think, oh, I can't do this. I can't do this. That's why do you think people are so driven by what other people think? Because they don't have a healthy image of themselves. That's why. Like, I think about this all the time. Why isn't everybody winning? Because they don't commit. They don't decide who they're going to be. And we've got to light a fire under ourselves. We've got to put ourselves on fire, because what I learned a long time ago, every single person can have a great life. I don't care about your background. I was an underdog. I was the smallest kid growing up, and I would compete with kids 4 years older. They beat the crap out of me. We'd play football, and I'd just jump up. I've always been an underdog. I think everybody's an underdog. So nobody has an excuse because they're past. I'm not saying people didn't have difficult past. But it doesn't matter. The past doesn't matter. And until we start understanding that, we're always going to operate with a gorilla on our back holding us back. But that gorilla is ourselves. A lot of people think your mind is your friend. It's not always your friend. It is not always your friend. The first thing every day that I have to conquer, that you have to conquer, is that battle in your mind. I think your mind is amazing if you understand how to use it, but it's not always your friend. Think about all the lies you accept about yourself. People are letting something somebody said to them 20 years ago. Why are people so easily offended? Because they're always protecting themselves. What if I shared something that was very honest, and somebody didn't even hear me because they're trying to protect themselves? Like, I was telling you a story. I sent somebody a message yesterday, and I said, "Do you think you're a pushover?" And you started laughing. You're like, "I can't believe you talk to people like this." And I said, I was doing it from love. And they said, sometimes. I said, I want you to eliminate that. You got to take a stand of who you are. I don't want you to ever be a pushover. I do it with love, though. I do it because I care about people. And I just know what's possible.
You brought up something earlier that I think so many people can relate to, and that is with burnout, having the wrong work habits, which leads to burnout. I think there's also the flip side of that, where someone has really no work habits because they're focused so much on philosophy and planning and studying, and they've convinced themselves that the planning is the working. So you've got like both ends of the spectrum. Is there a balance between, yes, like consuming information that's positive, learning new processes, learning new strategies, but also balancing that with the implementation side to create the perfect work habit environment for yourself?
Well, if you look at our life of what we have access to now, I think people are great at gathering information.
Mm-hmm.
I think people who come to me, they're phenomenal at gathering information, but they're terrible at execution. And we have to be better at the execution than the gathering of information. People listen to our podcast. How many implement it? I don't know. We get a lot of people who have, yes. But why doesn't everybody? Because they don't understand. Why? Because execution takes doing. Why don't people do? Because they never decided who they're going to be. Action always follows decision. Action is never before decision, but they never fully decide. And decision is not intellectual, it's emotional. This is what I'm doing.
Another reason I think a lot of people don't take action is because they don't want to be bad at something.
Yeah.
They don't want to do something for the first time. It's uncomfortable.
Well, that's the problem. Why don't they want to be uncomfortable? Because they never decided.
Yeah.
Think about a time you really decided you didn't know how to do something and you just do it. I had a client yesterday that I was working with. It is very common. And he said, I have such a high standard towards going to the gym, but when I get to work, I don't have that same standard. And I said, yeah, that's normal. We got to change that. It's just because you have a certain comfort that you've already created a part of your identity. For example, going to the gym. I said, what I want you to do is pretend when you get into work that you're in the gym, and come with that same attitude. Come with that same attitude. And if you do that, that's when it'll change. I want people to live what I'm telling them, not just hear what I'm telling them.
Mm-hmm.
People think they don't understand what learning is. They think because I consume information, I learn. That's not how you learn. Learning is when the result changes, when the behavior changes, when the identity changes. Everything is shaping your identity. Like right now, what we're talking about is shaping our identity. So then you go, what does this have to do with work habits? Everything. Until you take care of the person, you're not going to do the necessary things. But when you start seeing yourself different, then you're going to do everything that's necessary.
You know what? I think about tying this episode really to the episode that we had last week on quitting and what you're doing with your work habits and consistency and discipline and taking, yourself out of just collecting information, but to actually implementing it and getting into action towards your future truth. If you think of a balloon, you're inflating the balloon. And then when you quit, even for a day, you're letting a little air out. For a week, a lot more air out. What do you think is the tie between identity, which obviously ties to everything we talk about on the podcast, and these two topics of quitting and work habits?
Well, number one, it's how we see ourselves. Number two, it's measure yourself against an outcome, which is a losing formula. You want to measure yourself against your disciplines, your standards, your actions. That's all I measure myself every day. All I can do every day is my best. That's all I can do. I can't control the outside. Yet people think they can control the outside. Then they treat themselves so poorly if they're not at an outside. If I could give you two things that I will tell you that broke me free, that will break you free. Number one, do hard things first thing in the morning. And then number two, be so damn good to yourself. If you just do those two things, you're going to have a different attitude towards hard. You're going to have a different attitude. And always have the philosophy, I'm never going to quit. I'm not going to quit on myself. I think it's really important to have a why. Like on my screensaver, on my phone, it's my family. I look at it every day. That's my why. That is my why every day. I look at it all the time. It's just a reminder for me. I've been doing this forever though. Like I've had that on forever. I don't just have it on my screen just to see my family. I want it to be a reminder of why I'm doing this, why I'm building the life that I am. Because right now, every one of us is an example for somebody. We're either an example for our team, for our customers, for our kids, for our some of us grandkids, spouses, friends. We're an example. And what we have to do is understand why we're doing it. But you have to kill off your old you, not just cover it up. Most people are covering it up. They're doing really well, but they're doing it based on will. You want to do it based on identity, not will, because will not last.
So I'm glad you brought back up family because it reminded me of something I wanted to ask you earlier. You brought up how you've seen people think they're creating positive work habits, but they've taken it to the extremes and to the detriment maybe of their family. And that's one of the reasons why our core values, which we've talked about on the podcast, it's been a while, so you'd have to go back and look for it, but why our core values are so important, because once you set those core values of what's really important to you, and then you match it with your work habits. Will you talk about the connection between the two?
Well, for me, you never sacrifice family, like I said earlier. That's like non-negotiable for me. I think if your house is great, your life is going to be great. So I think you got to take care of the house. And now some people may not have a spouse or may not have kids. You got to take care of your environment in your house, So I think a lot of people have this definition of success that relates to work habits. So they don't do it because they say, I'm going to have to sacrifice everything to have what I want. It is not true. Like I have such a rich life. It has nothing to do with money. It has zero to do with money. That's not where I connect the riches to. Like I get to change people's lives every day. There's nothing better. I have a wonderful family. Nothing better. I take great experiences. Nothing better. I have great friends. I have the best friends. Like I have friends. The majority of my friends are 40 years. We've been friends for 40 years. Like my closest friends. We've been friends for 40 years. Think about that. That's richness. Like I have a great relationship with my brother. Richness. You gotta, I talk about it all the time. It always starts with philosophy. What does my philosophy of my life want to be? What does it want to be? And that's what we have to understand, because going back to the beginning of this, I have great work habits, yes, but where was it created? It was created the day I decided to start committing. It was the day I stopped playing it safe. It was the day I stopped screwing around. It was the day I got honest with myself and said you were a fraud. This is, who do you want to be? Do you want to just get by in life, or do you want to challenge yourself? That was the day. All of this now, years later, has changed, but it all started that one decision. That's why I always say one decision can change your life.
I would even say that your work habits were created to support what you have as core values or what's important to you, not to the detriment of. Before we go any further on that, let's get into an action step for this week.
Well, when we're looking at that, do you know your why? And ask yourself, am I committed? I'm not saying you don't have a goal, but are you committed to it? And what I mean committed, you have a timeline, you're working from that idea every day. You're not working to it, you're working from it. And I would start getting really honest with yourself and start eliminating the negative influences in your life. That's negative habits. That could be negative people. That could be negative excuses. I would start there. And I would decide who you're going to be. And when you decide who you're going to be, you watch. Just in 3 months, watch what happens. Just in 3 months. That is the action step.
I love it. Arash, thank you so much. Thanks to all of you. If you enjoyed today's episode, go ahead and leave us a rating and review. And most importantly, share this with your friends and family members or on social media. We'll see you next week for another episode of the 7-Figure Standard Podcast.
Thank you for listening to this episode of 7-Figure Standard. We hope you found the insights and strategies helpful on your journey to success. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a rating and review on your favorite podcast platform to help us reach more people like you. To learn more about Arash and Mykie and how Voss Coach & Co. can help you achieve your goals and reach new levels of success, visit vosscoachandco.com. Thank you again for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode of 7-Figure Standard.